Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. Tonight, as the world sleeps and silence blankets Hogwarts, an ancient secret begins to whisper once more. Hidden behind the towering stone walls of the castle lies a lost chamber, a place guarded by time and forgotten by history. Created by Merlin himself, it holds the greatest secrets of magic, waiting for those brave enough to find it. For students unknowingly step toward their destiny, following hidden clues, unraveling ancient spells, and facing trials that test not only their strength but also their hearts and minds. Tonight, the story unfolds again. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the whispers of the past guide you into the legend of the Lost Chamber of Merlin. The halls of Hogwarts were bathed in a soft glow of candlelight, flickering against the ancient stone walls as the night settled in. The castle, alive with the murmurs of unseen spirits and the occasional hoot of an owl, was never truly silent. Yet, in the depths of the library, there was a peculiar kind of stillness, a quiet charged with curiosity and the rustling of parchment. Harry Potter sat at one of the long wooden tables, absent-mindedly twirling a quill between his fingers. Across from him, Ron Weasley stifled a yawn, his head resting on a pile of books he had no real intention of reading. Hermione Granger, however, was wide awake, her eyes scanning the aged pages of a particularly large tome with unwavering focus. "This is fascinating," Hermione murmured, brushing a stray curl from her face. "I found a passage about a hidden chamber, one that hasn't been discovered for centuries." Ron groaned. "Not another secret chamber. Haven't we had enough of those?" Harry smirked. "You have to admit, though, it's a bit exciting." "What does it say, Hermione?" She straightened up, her excitement barely contained. "It's called the Lost Chamber of Merlin. According to legend, it was built within Hogwarts itself, hidden so well that no wizard has been able to find it since the days of the founders. It is said to contain some of Merlin's greatest secrets, perhaps even spells or artifacts that could change magic as we know it." Ron lifted his head slightly, looking skeptical. "Right. And I suppose Merlin just decided to pop into Hogwarts and build himself a secret hideout?" Hermione rolled her eyes. "Merlin was a student of Hogwarts, Ron. He was one of the most powerful wizards in history, and many believe he had knowledge beyond even the greatest of our time. If he did create a hidden chamber, it wouldn't be surprising." Harry leaned in, intrigued. "Does it say anything about where it might be?" Hermione frowned, flipping through the pages. "Not exactly. But it mentions something about whispers in the walls, voices that can only be heard at night, leading those who listen closely to the entrance." Before anyone could respond, a dreamy voice interrupted them. "I've heard them before," Luna Lovegood said softly. The trio turned to see Luna standing nearby, her silver blue eyes wide as if recalling something distant. She carried a small stack of books, but her attention was fully on them now. Ron blinked. "You, what?" Luna moved closer, her expression thoughtful. "The walls at Hogwarts, they whisper, you know. Most people don't listen closely enough, but sometimes, late at night, if you're quiet, you can hear them talking." Hermione looked at her skeptically. "Are you sure it's not just Peeves playing tricks?" Luna shook her head. "No, it's different. It's older. It doesn't feel like Peeves at all. It feels like a memory that wants to be found. Harry exchanged a glance with Ron, both of them unsure what to make of this. But Hermione was clearly intrigued. "Luna, where did you hear these whispers?" she asked. Luna tilted her head, thinking. "Mostly near the third-floor corridor. But only when I was alone. They don't like to be heard by too many people at once." Ron groaned again. "Of course it's the third-floor corridor. Because why wouldn't it be?" Harry grinned. "Well, we're not exactly new to dangerous corridors, are we?" Hermione was already closing her book, determination in her eyes. "I think we should investigate. If Luna's right, and the whispers really are connected to the Lost Chamber, we might be the first ones in centuries to find it." Ron sighed, rubbing his face. "Let me guess, we're doing this tonight, aren't we?" Harry clapped him on the back. "Of course we are." The decision was made. As the night deepened, the four of them slipped quietly from the library, their footsteps barely making a sound on the worn stone floor. The corridors of Hogwarts had a different feel at night, less of the lively chatter of students, more of the ancient, breathing presence of the castle itself. Shadows stretched long against the walls, and the candlelight seemed dimmer, as if reluctant to burn too brightly in the quiet hours. They moved carefully, avoiding Filch and Mrs. Norris, taking the long route toward the third-floor corridor. Luna led the way, her movements light and effortless, as though she was simply following a path she had walked 100 times before. It wasn't long before they reached the infamous corridor, the one that had once housed the trapdoor to the Sorcerer's Stone back in their first year. Now, it looked perfectly ordinary. "All right," Harry whispered. "Now what?" Luna closed her eyes, tilting her head slightly. The others watched as she stood still, listening. The seconds stretched on, and just as Ron was about to whisper something sarcastic, Luna's eyes snapped open. "There," she breathed, pointing toward the farthest stretch of the corridor. Hermione frowned. "There's nothing there but a wall." "Exactly," Luna murmured. "But if you listen closely, you can hear them." Harry took a cautious step forward, straining his ears. At first, all he could hear was the silence of the empty hallway. Then, faintly, so faintly that he wasn't sure if he was imagining it, a whisper brushed against his ears. It was not a voice in the normal sense. It was more like a memory of a voice, a breath against the walls, a soft, distant murmur in a language he didn't quite understand. The sound sent a shiver down his spine, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, something that felt old and knowing. "You hear it, don't you?" Luna whispered beside him. Harry nodded slowly. "Yeah. It's strange." Hermione stepped closer, listening intently. "It's ancient magic," she murmured. "I think the castle itself is remembering something." Ron, who had his arms crossed, shifted uncomfortably. "All right, so we hear some creepy whispers. What now?" Luna smiled. "Now, we follow them." As the whispers grew clearer, they realized the sound was leading them, guiding them towards something unseen. The four of them moved cautiously, following the trail of murmurs as they led deeper into the corridor toward the solid stone wall at the end. Then, just as they reached it, the whispers ceased. Silence fell around them, thick and expectant. Harry reached out, pressing his hand against the cool stone. Nothing happened. No sudden opening, no magical search. But there was something about this wall, something different. Hermione pulled out her wand, murmuring an incantation under her breath. A soft, golden glow spread across the stone, revealing faint, ancient markings that had long been hidden from sight. The symbols were unfamiliar yet mesmerizing, shifting slightly as if responding to their presence. "We're close," Hermione whispered. The whispers had led them here. The wall before them was not just an ordinary wall. It was the threshold of something lost to time. And now, they had to find a way in. The 4 students stood before the stone wall, their breath quiet, their minds racing. The whispers had guided them here, but the way forward remained a mystery. The ancient symbols glowing faintly beneath Hermione's spell seemed to shift under their gazes, as though alive with a magic beyond their understanding. Ron reached out tentatively and ran his fingers along the cold surface. "All right, so we found a weird wall. Now what?" Hermione didn't answer immediately. Her brows knitted together as she traced the patterns with her wand, muttering incantations under her breath. "There's something here," she murmured. "But it's not a door in the traditional sense. It's waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Harry asked, his eyes narrowing as he examined the strange carvings. Before Hermione could respond, Luna stepped closer and pressed her ear against the stone. "It's listening," she whispered dreamily. Ron blinked. "Listening?" Luna nodded. "It doesn't want spells. It wants words." Harry turned toward Hermione, expecting her to have an answer, but she was already flipping through the pages of the large book she had brought. "This could be connected to one of Merlin's enchantments," she said, skimming the text rapidly. "He was known for crafting magical doors that required more than just brute force or wands. They needed wisdom to pass." "Well, that's just great," Ron sighed. Because nothing about Merlin was complicated at all. Hermione ignored him as she continued reading. Then, suddenly, she froze. Her eyes darted back up to the wall. "Oh," she breathed. "I think I know what this is." She turned to face the others, excitement flashing across her features. "There's a passage here that talks about a test of knowledge. Merlin believed that the greatest power wasn't strength or magic, but wisdom. If this is truly his chamber, then it won't let us in unless we prove that we understand that. So, what are we supposed to do?" Ron asked, crossing his arms. Hermione pointed at the shifting symbols. "We need to ask the right question." Silence hung in the air. Then, Harry took a step forward, staring at the glowing markings. He thought for a moment before speaking clearly. What is the greatest magic of all? For a moment, nothing happened. The castle was as still as ever, the only sound the distant creaking of old wooden beams. But then, slowly, the symbols on the wall rearranged themselves, shifting like liquid gold, forming a new inscription. Luna smiled as she read it. "That which is not seen, but felt. That which guides, but does not control. Love," Hermione breathed. The moment the word left her lips, the symbols flared brightly before fading into nothingness. The stone wall trembled, and with a low, grinding sound, a small section of it slid aside, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Ron let out a breath. "I can't believe that worked." Harry stepped forward cautiously, his wand drawn. The passage was dimly lit by torches that had ignited on their own, their flames flickering as if welcoming them. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and something else, something ancient, almost electric. "Come on," Harry said, leading the way inside. They moved carefully down the passage, their footsteps echoing slightly against the stone walls. The corridor was narrow, forcing them to walk in a single file. The deeper they went, the more the torches brightened, casting long, eerie shadows. After what felt like minutes, the passageway opened into a larger chamber. And in the center of the room stood something unexpected, a mirror. It was unlike the mirror of Ariste, though it was just as grand. Its frame was made of silver, inscribed with runes that shimmered softly in the torchlight. The glass itself was peculiar. It did not reflect their images, but instead swirled with a misty, shifting darkness, as though it held secrets within. "This must be another test," Hermione murmured, stepping closer. "But what kind?" Ron hesitated. "Maybe we should think about this before touching anything. We all remember the last time we found a mysterious mirror, don't we?" Harry ignored him and peered into the swirling depths. As he did, shapes began to form within the glass, indistinct at first, then becoming clearer. A castle, ancient and grand, standing on a hill. A figure with a long beard and piercing eyes, his hand raised as if casting a spell. "Merlin," Luna whispered, her breath misting against the surface of the mirror. As soon as she spoke his name, the image shifted, and words appeared along the silver frame, glowing softly. "Seek not the power you desire, but the truth you fear." Hermione inhaled sharply. "This is a trial. The mirror isn't meant to show what we want, it's meant to reveal something hidden within us." Ron groaned. "Great. Just what I needed, more introspection." Luna smiled. "Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it just wants to help us understand something." "Or test us," Harry said grimly. Hermione nodded. "I think each of us has to look into it and face whatever it shows us." A tense silence fell over them. Then, before anyone else could, Harry stepped forward. The moment his gaze met the shifting mist, the image within solidified. He saw himself, older, stronger, standing in a battlefield of broken wands and crumbling stone. He held the Elder Wand in his grasp, its power humming through him. Around him, figures lay motionless. He knew, instinctively, that they were not his enemies. They were his friends. He flinched and stepped back, his breath sharp. The mirror returned to swirling mist. "What did you see?" Hermione asked softly. Harry hesitated. "It doesn't matter." Hermione frowned but didn't push. Instead, she turned to Luna. "You go next." Luna stepped forward, gazing into the mist. After a moment, a soft, sad expression crossed her face. She tilted her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she smiled. "I saw my mother," she whispered. "She told me she was proud of me." Ron shifted uncomfortably. "Blimey." Hermione inhaled and took her turn. She expected something academic, something about knowledge. But instead, she saw herself alone in a vast library, surrounded by towering shelves, but every book she reached for crumbled to dust in her hands. She had knowledge, but she had no one to share it with. She swallowed hard and stepped away, blinking rapidly. Ron groaned. "Oh, fine. Let's get this over with." He hesitated before looking into the mirror. His jaw tensed. "It's just me," he muttered. "Me, but I look happy. And I'm not in anyone's shadow." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, the mist in the mirror shifted again, and the inscription on the frame changed. "You have seen what is hidden. Now, will you accept the truth?" A soft rumbling filled the chamber. The wall behind the mirror shimmered, and an archway began to form. Beyond it lay another dark passage, deeper into the unknown. They had passed the mirror's test, and the true secret of Merlin's chamber was still waiting for them. The archway stood before them, its edges shimmering faintly with residual magic from the mirror's trial. A cold draft seeped through the passage beyond, carrying with it the scent of ancient stone and something else, something older than Hogwarts itself. The four of them exchanged wary glances before stepping forward together, their wands drawn. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the torches in the chamber behind them flickered and went out, plunging the previous room into darkness. The only light now came from the dim glow of their wands, casting long shadows along the walls of the new corridor. The passage stretched forward in a seemingly endless tunnel, its walls carved with runes similar to those they had seen on the sealed entrance. Unlike the previous chamber, which felt like it had been waiting for them, this corridor carried a different kind of energy. It was not welcoming, it was testing them. "This feels different," Hermione whispered, her fingers tightening around her wand. Luna tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. "The walls are humming," she said softly. Ron frowned. "Humming?" Harry strained his ears, but he could hear nothing beyond their own footsteps and the faint echoes bouncing back from the stone. "I don't hear anything." Luna gave a small, knowing smile. "Not with your ears. With your magic." Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione, who immediately turned her attention to the carvings along the walls. She ran her fingers over them carefully, her brows furrowed in concentration. "This magic is old," she murmured. "Older than the founders, maybe even older than Merlin himself. But it's been woven into the stone. It's meant to guide us." Ron let out a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, because it kind of feels like it's leading us to our doom." Hermione ignored him and raised her wand, whispering a detection spell. A faint golden thread of light flickered to life, running along the walls and stretching deeper into the corridor, disappearing into the darkness ahead. "A magical path," she murmured. "It wants us to follow." Harry took the lead, walking cautiously as the golden thread pulsed faintly with each step they took. The further they went, the quieter the air around them became. The echoes of their footsteps no longer returned, as if the corridor had swallowed all sound. Then, suddenly, they reached a fork. Two identical paths stretched before them, both lined with the same runes, the same faint glow. The golden thread of magic stopped at the divide, offering no indication of which way to go. Ron groaned. "Oh, come on. Not another riddle." Hermione turned back to the walls, searching for any clues. There must be something here. Some kind of hint. Luna stepped forward, once again tilting her head as if listening. Then, she pointed to the left. "This way." Ron looked at her suspiciously. "And how do you know that?" Luna smiled serenely. Because the right path doesn't want us to take it. Harry hesitated. What do you mean? The air is too still, Luna explained. There's no magic in the right path. It's hollow. It's a trap. Hermione considered this, then murmured another detection spell, this time aiming toward the right-hand path. The glow of her wand flickered oddly, as if it had encountered something unnatural. A moment later, the air at the entrance of the right corridor distorted slightly, revealing an illusion, a wall of shadowy mist concealed just beyond the threshold. Ron took a step back. Yeah, definitely not going that way. Harry nodded. All right. Left it is. They stepped into the left corridor, moving cautiously once more. The golden thread of magic returned, winding ahead of them, reassuring them that this was indeed the right choice. The walls, however, had changed. The carvings had become more elaborate, depicting scenes of robed figures casting spells, of great storms controlled by wands, and of a lone wizard standing before a massive, swirling vortex. Hermione stopped, tracing one of the figures with her fingers. I think this is a record of Merlin's journey, she whispered in awe. Harry looked at the images. What's that? He pointed to the vortex in one of the scenes. Hermione shook her head. I don't know. It looks like some kind of portal, or maybe a gateway. A gateway to what? Ron asked warily. Another plane of existence, perhaps, Luna offered. Some wizards believe Merlin had knowledge of other realms beyond our own. Maybe he created a way to reach them. Ron shuddered. Brilliant. Because that doesn't sound terrifying at all. Before Hermione could respond, the corridor suddenly shifted. The walls trembled slightly, and for the first time, sound returned, though not their own. A whisper. It was faint, just at the edge of hearing, but it was enough to make them all freeze. Then another whisper. And another. The voices were layered, overlapping, too quiet to understand but undeniably present. They weren't speaking in any language they recognized, but the sound of them sent a chill down Harry's spine. The whispers grew louder, and then the walls rippled. Not crumbled, not shook, rippled, like water disturbed by a single drop. And from the ripples, shadows began to emerge. They weren't dementors, nor were they ghosts. They were something else entirely, vague, flickering figures that moved in and out of sight, as if they were only half real. Ron swore under his breath. I don't suppose anyone has a spell for make the creepy shadow things go away? Hermione had already lifted her wand. They're not attacking, she whispered. I think they're memories. Memories of what? Harry asked, his grip tightening on his wand. Of the ones who came before us, Luna answered, her voice eerily calm. Wizards who tried to find the Lost Chamber but never made it through. A heavy silence followed her words. The shadows continued to move, whispering their unintelligible secrets. Then, as if drawn by unseen force, they began to drift toward the four of them. Harry instinctively stepped in front of the others. What do they want? Luna watched them closely. To be remembered. To be acknowledged. Hermione exhaled slowly. If they are memories, then they're trapped here, stuck in this corridor for eternity. Ron swallowed hard. So how do we get past them without, joining them. Hermione hesitated, then spoke clearly. We acknowledge them. She turned toward the closest shadow and said, with as much certainty as she could muster, we see you. The shadow froze. Then, slowly, it nodded. The whispering quieted, and the figure began to fade. Harry caught on quickly. We honor you. Another shadow stilled, bowing slightly before vanishing into the walls. Luna smiled. We remember you. One by one, the whispering figures dissipated, leaving only the four of them standing in the now silent corridor. The golden thread of magic pulsed once more, urging them forward. Harry let out a slow breath. Well, that was unsettling. Ron let out a nervous laugh. I'd like to formally request that the next secret chamber we find just have a regular old locked door instead of all this mind-bending stuff. Hermione shook her head, but she was smiling. Come on. I think we're getting close. They turned toward the path ahead, the golden thread leading them deeper into the unknown. The secrets of Merlin were waiting, and they were ready to uncover them. The corridor stretched before them, winding deeper into the heart of the castle. The golden thread of magic pulsed faintly, urging them forward, but the air had grown heavier, thick with something unseen yet deeply felt. Each step they took echoed unnaturally, as if the stones themselves were murmuring beneath their feet. Harry kept his wand raised, his eyes scanning ahead for any signs of danger. Ron walked beside him, his face set in determination, though his grip on his wand was tight. Hermione followed closely, muttering detection spells under her breath, while Luna moved with the same serene curiosity she always carried, as if she were strolling through an enchanted garden rather than a passage filled with ancient magic. This place feels different, Hermione murmured after a while. Not like before. It's watching us, Luna said dreamily, glancing at the walls. Or rather, something beyond the walls is. Ron shivered. Brilliant. More invisible things watching us. Just what I needed. Harry halted suddenly. The passage ahead widened into a circular chamber, grander than anything they had encountered before. The ceiling arched high above them, covered in constellations that shimmered as if they were truly part of the night sky. The floor was engraved with intricate designs, spirals and symbols stretching out in perfect symmetry. And at the center of the room stood a massive stone archway. Unlike the archway they had passed through earlier, this one was not shimmering or half-formed. It was solid, ancient, its surface carved with runes that pulsed faintly, as if a great power slept within. The golden thread of magic they had been following ended here, disappearing into the base of the arch. This must be it, Hermione whispered. The true entrance to the Lost Chamber, Harry said. Ron exhaled slowly. Well, that was easier than I expected. Luna giggled softly. Oh, Ron, she said. We haven't even met the Guardian yet. Ron blinked. The what now? As if summoned by her words, a low rumbling sound filled the chamber. The runes on the archway flared brighter, their glow intensifying until they bathed the entire room in eerie silver light. The air trembled, and from the very center of the arch, something began to form. At first, it was nothing more than a shifting distortion, like heat rising from stone. Then, slowly, it took shape, a towering figure draped in robes of mist and shadow. Its face was obscured beneath the folds of a deep hood, but its presence was overwhelming. It radiated an ancient power, something far older than Hogwarts, older than the founders themselves. When it spoke, its voice was neither loud nor soft, but it resonated deep within their bones. Who seeks the wisdom of the great Merlin? The four of them stood frozen for a moment. Then Harry stepped forward. We do, he said, his voice steady. We seek the Lost Chamber. The Guardian tilted its head slightly. The shadows of its robe swirled as if caught in an unseen wind. To enter, you must prove your worth. The path beyond is not for those who crave power, nor for those who seek glory. It is for those who understand. Ron shifted uncomfortably. Understand what, exactly? The Guardian extended one long, misty hand. In its palm, a shape began to form, small, glowing, twisting like liquid light. It hovered between them, pulsing faintly. To pass, you must choose, the Guardian intoned. And your choice will decide the fate of your journey. The light split into two distinct forms. One was a simple silver key, gleaming with soft, steady light. The other was a dagger, its blade translucent but sharp, glowing with an energy that crackled faintly like lightning. One unlocks the way, the Guardian said. The other forces it open. Silence filled the chamber. The meaning behind the words was clear. They could take the key and enter as seekers of knowledge, or they could take the dagger and carve their own path. Hermione was the first to speak. It has to be the key, she said firmly. Merlin believed in wisdom, not force. The dagger is a test, a temptation. Ron eyed the dagger warily. What happens if we take it? The Guardian did not answer. Harry exhaled. We take the key. The moment he spoke the words, the dagger faded away, dissolving into nothingness. The key, however, remained, pulsing softly. It floated toward Harry, resting in his open palm. It was warm to the touch, filled with a quiet but undeniable power. The Guardian inclined its hooded head. You have chosen wisely. The path ahead is yours. With that, it slowly dissolved, its form fading into the air like mist at dawn. The runes on the archway blazed brighter, and with a deep, resonant hum, the space within the arch shimmered, transforming into a swirling, golden passage. Ron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I don't know about you lot, but I was really expecting a fight. Hermione rolled her eyes. Not everything has to be a battle, Ron. Luna smiled. But sometimes, the hardest battle is choosing the right path. Harry looked at the key in his hand, then at the glowing gateway. This is it, he murmured. The real Lost Chamber of Merlin. For a brief moment, none of them moved. They had come so far, passed every trial, faced every challenge. And now, the final threshold stood before them, waiting. Then, with a determined breath, Harry stepped forward and placed the key into the air before the gateway. It vanished in a pulse of golden light. The air shimmered, and the golden passage deepened, its glow stretching into infinity. Beyond it, something waited, something ancient, something that had been hidden for centuries. Luna was the first to step through, her expression filled with quiet wonder. Hermione followed, her heart pounding. Ron hesitated for only a second before muttering, "Here goes nothing," and stepping forward. Harry was the last. He cast one final glance at the chamber behind them, at the archway, at the runes still glowing softly in the dim light. Then, gripping his wand tightly, he took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown. The moment Harry stepped through the golden gateway, a rush of warmth engulfed him. It was not the searing heat of fire, nor the numbing chill of winter, but something else entirely, something familiar yet beyond his understanding. The sensation was like stepping through a memory, a space untouched by time, where the very air seemed to hum with ancient magic. He stumbled forward slightly, blinking as the light around him dimmed, revealing their new surroundings. The four of them stood in what appeared to be an immense circular hall. The walls, impossibly high, were covered in bookshelves carved directly into the stone, stretching toward a ceiling veiled in swirling constellations. The books were thick with age, bound in worn leather and covered in dust, yet the air held no musty scent, only the faint, crisp smell of parchment infused with magic. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform, and atop it stood a single pedestal. Resting upon it was an ornate, silver-bound book. The cover shimmered in the dim light, its title engraved in flowing script, Codex Merlini. Hermione let out a breathless gasp. "It's real," she whispered, stepping forward, her eyes wide with wonder. "Merlin's Codex, his greatest work." Ron let out a nervous chuckle. "Right, brilliant, we found the book. Let's grab it, Anne." Before he could finish, a deep vibration rumbled through the floor. The glow of the gateway behind them faded, sealing them inside. The air grew thick, and suddenly, the very walls of the chamber began to shift. The bookshelves trembled, their tomes rustling as if whispering to one another. The constellations above shifted, forming intricate patterns before dissolving once more. Then, from the very heart of the room, a spectral figure emerged, its form flickering like candlelight, yet carrying an unmistakable presence. It was an old man, his beard long and silver, his robes flowing like woven mist. His eyes, though ghostly, carried a sharpness that cut through the air itself. He looked at them, not with hostility, but with measured curiosity. "Merlin," Luna whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the illusion before them. The apparition, Merlin's echo, gazed at each of them in turn before finally speaking, his voice deep and resonant, as if it came from the very stones of the castle itself. "Who among you seeks the truth?" The four of them exchanged uncertain glances. Then, slowly, Harry stepped forward. "We all do," he said. "We came here to learn, to understand." Merlin's echo nodded. "Then know this, knowledge is neither gift nor burden. It is responsibility. Those who seek it must prove they are ready to bear its weight." The air around them shifted again. The bookshelves darkened, their texts flickering as if caught between reality and dream. The pedestal holding the codex seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with their own heartbeats. Then, without warning, the chamber split apart. Or at least, it seemed to. In an instant, the floor beneath them dissolved, and each of them found themselves standing alone in endless darkness. Harry's breath hitched. "Ron? Hermione? Luna?" No answer. The vast emptiness stretched in every direction, swallowing his voice before it could echo. He gripped his wand tighter, his heartbeat quickening. Was this another illusion? Another test? Then, before him, a figure appeared. It was himself. but not as he was now. This Harry was younger, 11 years old, standing uncertainly in his Hogwarts robes, his eyes filled with the same cautious hope he had carried on his first day at the castle. The boy looked at him, his expression shifting between wonder and weariness. "You want to understand," the younger Harry said. "But do you even know who you are?" Harry stiffened. "Of course I do." The younger version of himself tilted his head. "Do you?" Before he could respond, the boy lifted a hand, and suddenly the darkness around them flickered with moments from his past. He saw himself in the mirror of a Reese, staring longingly at his parents. He saw himself at the Triwizard Tournament, facing the dragon, surviving because he had no other choice. He saw himself in the Forbidden Forest, walking to meet death, willing to give up everything for the sake of others. The images surrounded him, overwhelming, each one a reminder of the path he had walked. "You spent your whole life fighting," the younger Harry said quietly. "But what happens when there's no one left to fight?" The words struck deeper than Harry expected. He had always been defined by the battles he faced, the struggles, the victories, the sacrifices. But what was left beyond them? Before he could answer, the scene shifted again. A new figure appeared. Dumbledore. Not a memory, not a portrait, but something more, an echo, perhaps, like Merlin himself. The old headmaster regarded him with the same warmth and wisdom Harry had missed for so long. "You are not here to prove your worth, Harry," Dumbledore said softly. "You have already done so 1,000 times over. The question now is, do you seek knowledge for the sake of power or for the sake of wisdom?" Harry swallowed. "For wisdom," he answered. Dumbledore smiled, and the darkness receded. The weight of all he had seen lifted slightly, though the echoes of it remained. And then, as quickly as it had disappeared, the chamber returned. Harry gasped, realizing he was standing once more before the pedestal. Hermione, Ron, and Luna were beside him, their faces pale, as if they had experienced their own trials. They exchanged silent glances, each of them understanding that whatever had just happened, it had changed them. Merlin's echo stood before them once more, his gaze filled with quiet approval. "You have faced yourselves and emerged with understanding. That is the only key you truly needed." The pedestal shimmered, and the codex slowly opened. Pages turned of their own accord, revealing ancient scripts and diagrams, spells that had been lost to time, theories of magic far beyond anything they had ever studied. The wisdom of Merlin lay before them, waiting to be read. But before they could take a step forward, Merlin's echo raised a hand. "A final choice remains." The book glowed faintly, and the air around them stilled. "Knowledge is power, but power must be tempered with wisdom. You may take the codex from this chamber, but in doing so, you will erase its presence from this place forever. The knowledge will be yours alone, but lost to all who come after you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Or you may leave it here. You may read, learn, and carry its wisdom forward, but the chamber will remain hidden, waiting for those who, like you, are ready to seek it." The choice hung before them. Hermione's lips parted slightly in awe. "This is why it was never found," she murmured. "Everyone who came before us had to make this decision." Ron ran a hand through his hair. "So, what do we do?" Harry looked at the book, then at Merlin's echo, and finally at his friends. The choice was theirs. A heavy silence filled the chamber as Merlin's echo watched them, his translucent form flickering softly like candlelight. The golden glow of the Codex Merlini pulsed in the stillness, as if aware of the choice before them. The weight of it pressed upon their shoulders, not a burden, but a responsibility. Hermione was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. If we take it, we'll have access to knowledge no wizard has seen in centuries. The spells, the theories, everything Merlin left behind. But if we do, it disappears forever. No one else will ever find it. Ron ran a hand through his hair, his face torn between wonder and hesitation. That's a lot to put on 4 people, isn't it? How are we supposed to decide something like that? Luna, who had been quiet, gently traced a fingertip along the surface of the pedestal. I think that's the point, she said softly. Merlin didn't just want his wisdom found. He wanted to make sure the ones who found it knew the cost of having it. Harry felt the words settle in his chest like a stone. He thought of all the times he had been given power, not just the Elder Wand, but everything before it. He had held the fate of the wizarding world in his hands before, and every time he had chosen to wield it for others, not himself. But this was different. This was knowledge. And knowledge could be even more dangerous than power. He stepped closer to the pedestal, feeling the hum of magic through his very skin. He looked at the codex, at the runes that glowed faintly along its spine, at the parchment that seemed untouched by time. This book could hold spells to heal wounds beyond a simple counter-curse, theories on magic even Hermione hadn't read, secrets that had been buried for centuries. But was it right to take it? The others stepped closer too, their eyes flicking between the book and one another. Each of them knew that whatever they decided, it would shape more than just their own futures. Ron exhaled sharply. I dunno, mate. If we take it, yeah, we have all the answers we could ever need. But then, what if someone else needed them more than we do? Hermione nodded, her expression filled with conflict. And if we leave it, it means another group, someday, maybe centuries from now, could have this same chance. They could make their own choice. Luna smiled faintly. And maybe that's the magic of it. It isn't just about what's written here. It's about the decision itself. Merlin didn't want this book to belong to just one person. He wanted it to belong to time itself. Harry let out a slow breath. He thought of Dumbledore's words in the trial he had faced. Do you seek knowledge for power or for wisdom? This wasn't about keeping something for themselves. It was about letting it remain for those who truly needed it. We leave it, he said at last. His voice was steady, sure. We read what we can, but we leave it here. This chamber, this knowledge, wasn't meant to belong to just us. It was meant to be found over and over again. Hermione swallowed, but she nodded. I think you're right. Ron sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You know, part of me was really hoping you'd say we could take it. But I know you're right too. Luna simply smiled, as if she had known the answer all along. Merlin's echo observed them, and for the first time, the faintest trace of a smile crossed his translucent face. You have chosen wisely. The codex shone brighter, its pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze that did not exist. Then, without warning, the book opened, flipping rapidly through its contents. The golden light intensified, filling the chamber, and suddenly, The knowledge poured into them. It was not words on a page or spells to be memorized. It was understanding. A deep, visceral feeling of magic itself, an imprint of the wisdom Merlin had left behind. Theories that had no names, concepts that had no words, yet they knew them. For a fleeting moment, they felt what it was like to see magic as Merlin had seen it, not as a tool, not as power, but as something woven into the very fabric of existence. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded. The golden glow softened, and the chamber seemed to exhale as if it had been holding its breath. The codex closed itself, its surface once again still, untouched. It had given them what it could, what they were meant to receive. Hermione pressed a hand to her forehead. I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words what that was. Ron looked dazed. Yeah. Me neither. But I think I get it. Luna nodded, her eyes dreamy but knowing. It was a gift, she said. And gifts are meant to be shared. Harry looked at his friends, and he knew they had all come to the same realization. They hadn't needed to take the book. They had needed to understand it. And they had. Merlin's echo stepped back, his form beginning to fade. Your journey does not end here. Wisdom is not something one finds, it is something one carries forward. Go now, and let what you have learned shape the world beyond these walls. As his figure vanished, the chamber around them began to tremble. The bookshelves, the glowing constellations, even the pedestal itself, everything began to blur, as if dissolving into mist. The chamber's disappearing. Hermione gasped. Then we'd better move. Ron yelled. The golden gateway reappeared behind them, flickering like a flame in the wind. Without hesitation, they ran. The walls around them faded, the floor trembled, and just as the last traces of the chamber vanished into nothingness, they burst through the gateway. The instant they crossed the threshold, they found themselves back in the original stone corridor. The passage behind them was now nothing more than a blank wall, smooth and unmarked, as if no door had ever been there. They stood in stunned silence, catching their breath. The only sign that anything had happened at all was the faint hum of magic still lingering in the air. Ron let out a shaky laugh. Well, that was, he shook his head. I don't even know what that was. Hermione pressed a hand against the wall where the entrance had been. It's gone, she murmured. Until someone else is ready to find it again. Luna turned to Harry, her blue eyes filled with quiet understanding. We made the right choice. Harry nodded. Yeah, we did. For a long moment, they simply stood there, letting it all sink in. The chamber was gone, but what it had given them would stay with them forever. And though they might never see it again, they knew that someday, perhaps years, perhaps centuries from now, another group of seekers would stand where they had stood, face the same choice, and carry the wisdom forward once more. With one last glance at the empty wall, they turned and made their way back through the winding halls of Hogwarts, stepping into the future that awaited them. The halls of Hogwarts felt different as Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Luna walked in silence. Though the corridors remained the same, stone walls lined with torches, moving staircases creaking softly in the distance, and the ever-present whispers of portraits, it was as if the very air around them had shifted. The knowledge they had gained in the Lost Chamber still thrummed inside them, lingering in their minds like an echo of something vast and incomprehensible. None of them spoke immediately. The weight of what they had experienced, what they had chosen, sat heavily in their chests. They had walked into legend, faced a test set by one of the greatest wizards who had ever lived, and left with wisdom beyond words. Yet, despite that, there was a strange, bittersweet finality to it. Ron was the first to break the silence. "So," he said, rubbing his arms as if trying to shake off a chill. "What now?" Harry glanced at him, then at the others. "We go back," he said simply. "And we don't tell anyone what we found." Hermione bit her lip, but she nodded. "If we start telling people, the chamber will become a myth again. Some will believe us, others won't, but sooner or later, someone will try to find it. And they won't understand. They won't understand the choice," Luna finished for her voice calm but certain. "Merlin made sure the chamber could only be found by those who were meant to. If we talk too much about it, people might try to force their way in." Ron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "So we just pretend like we spent the last few hours, what? Wandering the castle? Studying? No one's going to believe that." Harry smirked. "You're not exactly known for your intense study habits, Ron. That might be the hardest part of all this." Ron rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. Instead, he shook his head. "I still can't wrap my head around it. I mean, we actually found Merlin's hidden chamber. We could have had every spell, every bit of knowledge he left behind, and we just walked away." Hermione gave him a small smile. "No, we didn't," she said gently. "We didn't take the book, but we took something just as important. You felt it too, didn't you? It wasn't just words or spells, it was an understanding of magic itself." Ron hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I guess I did." He frowned. "It's weird, though. I don't even know how to explain it." Harry knew exactly what he meant. The moment the codex had opened, it had been like standing at the edge of an endless ocean, overwhelming, infinite, and yet peaceful. He couldn't have put the knowledge into words if he tried. It wasn't something to be memorized or studied, it was something to be carried. Luna tilted her head slightly. "Maybe we're not meant to explain it," she mused. "Maybe we're just meant to live it." They turned a corner, nearing the Gryffindor common room. The warmth of the castle's torches flickered against the stone walls, grounding them in reality once more. For a moment, it was easy to believe that nothing had changed. That they had simply been out for a late-night walk, nothing more. But they all knew better. As they reached the portrait of the fat lady, Hermione hesitated. "Do we tell anyone?" she asked, looking at the others. Harry exhaled slowly. "I don't think we should. Not even Dumbledore ever spoke about the chamber. If he knew about it, and I think he did, he chose to keep it a secret." Ron folded his arms. "So, what? We just go back to normal life and pretend we didn't find the greatest lost chamber in wizarding history?" Luna gave him a soft smile. "Not pretend. Just keep it safe." Ron let out a deep breath, looking between them. "All right," he said finally. "All right. But I swear, if anyone ever tries to use legilimency on me, I'm running the other way." Harry chuckled. "Deal." Hermione turned to the portrait and muttered the password, and the fat lady swung open without question. As they stepped inside, the warm glow of the Gryffindor common room greeted them. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows against the red and gold decor. A few students remained, finishing up last-minute essays or chatting in hushed voices, but for the most part, the tower was quiet. As if sensing their exhaustion, the room seemed to embrace them, offering a moment of normalcy after a night that had been anything but. Ron stretched and yawned. "Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm knackered. Think I'll just..." He trailed off as he spotted something on one of the tables. A book. It wasn't unusual for books to be scattered around the Gryffindor common room. Students often left their notes and textbooks behind in the rush of schoolwork. But this one was different. Its cover was old, bound in deep blue leather, with silver runes etched along its spine. And though it wasn't the Codex Merlini, it felt like it had the same weight. Hermione, who had also noticed it, walked over cautiously and picked it up. She flipped open the cover, scanning the first few pages with wide eyes. She hesitated. "It's a collection of old magical theories. Some of them I've read before, but others I've never seen." She looked up at them, her brow furrowed. "Where did this come from?" Harry stepped closer, studying the book. "Do you think?" Luna touched the edge of the book lightly, her fingers brushing the silver runes. "Maybe this is what Merlin meant," she said. "That wisdom isn't just in one place. It moves. It finds those who need it." Hermione exhaled. "If that's true, then maybe the chamber wasn't the only place where lost knowledge waits to be found." Ron gave a half-hearted chuckle. "Right. So, what? Now books are just going to appear around us whenever we need them?" As if in response, a single page of the book fluttered on its own, settling open on a passage titled "The Nature of Magic and Time." Harry exchanged a glance with Hermione, Ron, and Luna. Maybe they hadn't left the chamber with the Codex. Maybe they hadn't taken the spells written within its pages. But something had followed them. And whatever it was, it wasn't finished with them yet. The Gryffindor common room remained quiet, save for the soft crackling of the fireplace. Outside the tower windows, the night was deep, speckled with stars that flickered like embers in the sky. The air carried a hushed stillness, as though Hogwarts itself understood the gravity of what had just happened. Harry, Hermione, Ron, and Luna stood around the mysterious book, their eyes scanning its ancient pages. Though it was not the Codex Merlini, it felt connected to their experience in the Lost Chamber, as if the wisdom they had chosen to leave behind had found a way to follow them after all. Hermione turned the delicate parchment carefully. This shouldn't be here," she murmured. "I've read dozens of magical archives, but this text, some of these theories aren't recorded anywhere. At least, not in any book I've ever seen." "Maybe it was waiting for us," Luna said softly. "Just like the chamber." Ron rubbed his arms as if shaking off a chill. "Yeah, well, I'm not sure I like that idea. Books following us? First it's knowledge, next thing you know, it's enchanted socks showing up in our trunks." Despite everything, Harry smirked. "Wouldn't be the weirdest thing we've seen." Ron grumbled but didn't argue. Instead, he sat down heavily on the couch, staring into the flames. "I still don't get it, though," he said after a moment. "We didn't take the book. we left the chamber. So why does it feel like something's unfinished? Hermione frowned slightly. Maybe because we're used to endings being clear, she said. Battles won, villains defeated, mysteries solved. But this isn't like that. This is bigger. Merlin didn't just leave behind a treasure. He left behind a test. And not just for us, for whoever finds the chamber next, and the ones after that. Harry exhaled, feeling the weight of her words settle inside him. And the cycle keeps going. Luna nodded, her eyes full of quiet certainty. Because wisdom isn't something you take. It's something you become. They all fell silent at that. The warmth of the common room should have been comforting, but there was a strange restlessness in the air. It wasn't unease, it was something deeper, a hum of understanding that had yet to settle. The four of them had walked into history that night, and though the chamber was gone, its echoes remained inside them. Finally, Hermione closed the book and set it down. We should rest, she said. We'll figure out what to do with this tomorrow. Harry wasn't sure if they would ever truly figure it out. But he nodded. As they rose to head for their dormitories, something strange happened. The moment Hermione stepped away, the book shimmered. A faint, golden light pulsed along its spine, and then it vanished. They all froze. Ron blinked. Did that book just disappear? Hermione whirled back, eyes wide. She reached out, running her hands over the table where the book had been. Nothing. No trace of magic, no lingering warmth. It was simply gone. Harry's pulse quickened. It was never meant to stay, he realized. Just like the chamber. Luna smiled softly. I think it found who it needed to find. A quiet understanding settled among them. The book had come to them not as a prize, but as a final whisper of the chamber's magic, a last confirmation that they had made the right choice. And now, just like Merlin's wisdom, it had moved on, waiting for the next seekers who would need it. Ron let out a slow breath. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I guess that means we are done, then. Hermione looked as though she wanted to argue, to analyze every possibility, but after a moment, she simply sighed. I suppose so. Harry cast one last glance around the common room. Everything looked the same. The chairs, the tables, the red and gold banners draped against the stone walls. But he knew better. They all did. Things would never truly be the same after tonight. He turned to his friends. Come on, he said. Let's get some sleep. One by one, they made their way up the dormitory stairs. Hermione and Luna disappeared into the girls' wing, while Harry and Ron climbed up toward their shared room. As Harry reached his bed, he hesitated for a moment, glancing out the window. The night sky stretched endlessly above Hogwarts, stars twinkling against the dark expanse. Somewhere out there, the Lost Chamber still existed, not in any physical sense, but in the threads of history, waiting to be found again. He thought of Merlin's echo, of the golden light that had filled the chamber, of the unspoken understanding that had settled in his heart. Your journey does not end here. Harry exhaled, a small smile tugging at his lips. No, it didn't. With that, he pulled back the covers, lay down, and closed his eyes. The future awaited. As the journey comes to an end, the echoes of the past fade into the quiet halls of Hogwarts once more. The Lost Chamber remains hidden, its secrets safe, waiting for the next seekers to uncover its wisdom. The whispers of Merlin still linger in the air, a reminder that true magic is not in what we take, but in what we understand. Some knowledge is meant to be carried, not possessed, woven into the fabric of those who are willing to listen. Now, the night deepens, wrapping the world in a gentle embrace. Let the stillness settle within you, like the quiet hum of ancient spells resting beneath the castle stones. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and drift into dreams where magic is endless and mysteries wait to be discovered.